here's a funny subject that's going to relate to what we're going to talk about today. When I start training off at federal agencies, I'll start saying, do you think my grandfathers and my uncles, and I'll tell them what region I'm from, born and raised. I'll say, what industry do you think my grandfathers and uncles worked in? And they all go, steel. And I go, exactly. I go, do you think they had to worry about their 401k and stock market returns back in the 50s, in the 40s when they were shucking steel? I don't think so. Yeah, they didn't have to worry about that stuff. I go, because they had a huge pension from United Steelworkers. Not huge, but they had a pension. I go, that was the old CSRS, Federal Retirement System, right? But they changed. And now you've got to know something about your retirement benefits, particularly your TSP, because your pension's just a small little holler compared to the old CSRS retirement system. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to consider one of the 5 major TSP funds today. How's that sound? We'll see if we can put a podcast together about the subject. And which fund would you like to talk about?
Well, I know an all-time favorite of yours, Charles, has been the I Fund. So let's dig into the I Fund.
CD Financial, where health meets wealth.
Welcome to the CD Financial Podcast. CD Financial, where health meets wealth. I am your host today, Charles Jama, Chuck D here. Marcus will be coming back too, I bet for sure. But today, Ann Vanderslice Warts is with me. Combined, we have over 40 years experience federally. How about that? Pretty staggering, Ann.
Pretty amazing, but you make up almost half of that. So
Watch out now. Come on, I'm not that old. Okay, so how's life treating you, Ann?
Life is great. I'm splitting my time between Maui and Colorado, 2 great locations to be in, and things are going great.
Those are 2 wonderful locations. I got to tell you, between Southern California, the Hawaiian Islands, and the Rockies, man, you're right. That is it when I think about it. But you're not touching in Southern California, and you've got an open invitation here. I love to bartend. I do, and I like to cook too. I actually love to cook. Depends. I just love to cook on the weekends. But I just really love serving people and feeding them. That was what my mother did. She was Lebanese, and that's just blown through the bloodline on me, at least. Yeah.
That's interesting because I feel the same way. I grew up in the Midwest, and cooking, it just comes naturally. If you are a female in a Midwestern family, you're learning to cook, at least in my generation.
Yeah. My oldest sister started cooking when she was like 15. She took 1 meal a week, and we loved it because she would do fun things. So in Pittsburgh, where I grew up, which is really, we never saw ourselves as Midwesterners, but we didn't see ourselves as East Coasters either. But so we have similar values to Iowa, I would say, Ann. But she started when tacos were this exotic thing that nobody had heard about in Pittsburgh. And they had all they had were hard taco shells. That was it. And she would buy those things. I don't know if they were Old El Paso, or I can't remember the brand, but they had them in the grocery store. And my sister got hold of the recipe for beef, and we had shredded lettuce and tomatoes and cheddar cheese shredded too. And oh man, we just thought that was it. This is before we even knew what salsa was. I mean, we did not know what salsa was. I mean, right? I mean, this was 40, 45 years ago, maybe longer. And it was just, I can remember the tacos, especially. Lisa's my oldest sister. I've got 3. She would make tacos, and we were like, yes, taco.
Right? Yeah, Taco Tuesday before it was popular.
Yeah, we did. We were just so Renaissance and ahead of ourselves, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. And Mom was an amazing cook by her own rights. I mean, she really was. Both my mom and dad were from here, but yeah, all my grandparents were immigrants, so there's that. Technically, My grandfather on my Slovak side was born in New Jersey. And then when he was like 1 year old baby, they went back to Czechoslovakia. Kind of, I don't know if they came here just so he would be automatically a naturalized citizen or what was going on there, but he actually was born here. So only three of my four grandparents technically were immigrants. He came back when he was 15. Those folks were tough. They get on a boat with $5 in their pocket and start a new life in the U.S. I'll tell you,
Incredible.
it was incredible too. But I'll tell you what I have noticed about the Slovaks. They are very hard workers. They do not mess around. And
Hmm.
from what I was told, the largest population of Slovak immigrants outside of Czechoslovakia is in the Pittsburgh region in southwestern PA. Yeah. Well, because you could get a job in the coal mines, you could get a job in the steel mill, and you could have a chicken in the pot, and a car in the driveway, and a television set. You could buy your own house if you worked hard and worked with your hands. No problem. And Slovaks were used to working with their hands, believe me. Yeah. Man, my grandfather, he had a fist. For a small guy, I have a pretty big fist. My grandpa's fist was like this. It was huge. It was. He had pythons for forearms, and he wasn't a big guy. He was like 5'8". But he was a mill electrician, and they had no idea what ergonomic hand tools were back then. No, I mean, he could just crank it down, right?
But they
Yeah,
were just living the American dream. That was the promise of coming to America, and then they fulfilled it.
they did. They were in a little town west of Pittsburgh called Aliquippa, both my parents. And in that little town, there was West Aliquippa to boot across the river. And so I guess the other side of the river was more the bankers and attorneys and stuff. And then you had these really ethnic peoples, right? And the Slovaks had their own blocks, even. And then the Italians and the Lebanese lived together. That was their thing because they kind of look alike, act alike, and they have olive oil, garlic, and red wine in common. So there's that. Yeah, eggplants. What else should I say? Yeah. So, and I grew up with a bunch of Italians in school too. We always seem to get along. I digress though. But Aliquippa, famous for several football players. Tony Dorsett was from there. Amazing running back for the Cowboys. Yeah. If I start listing the NFL football players from southwestern PA, you'll spin your head, that little region. How many like Hall of Fame football players are from there? And
Charles,
let's talk this. Let's talk about this. Oh, and here's a funny subject that's going to relate to what we're going to talk about today. When I start training off at federal agencies, I'll start saying, do you think my grandfathers and my uncles, and I'll tell them what region I'm from, born and raised. I'll say, what industry do you think my grandfathers and uncles worked in? And they all go, steel. And I go, exactly. I go, do you think they had to worry about their 401k and stock market returns back in the 50s, in the 40s when they were shucking steel? I don't think so. Yeah, they didn't have to worry about that stuff. I go, because they had a huge pension from United Steelworkers. Not huge, but they had a pension. I go, that was the old CSRS federal retirement system, right? But they changed. And now you've got to know something about your retirement benefits, particularly your TSP, because your pension's just a small little holler compared to the old CSRS retirement system. Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to consider one of the five major TSP funds today. How's that sound? We'll see if we can put a podcast together about the subject. And which fund would you like to talk about?
well, I know an all-time favorite of yours, Charles, has been the iFund. So let's dig into the iFund.
Okay. And do you want to tell them why this is an all-time favorite?
Well, I said that a little facetiously because when we consider the long-term returns of that iFund, we're really taking the most risk in that iFund. On the scale spectrum of risk from G, F, C, S, the I has the most risk. And so if I'm willing to take the most risk, what do I also think I'll get?
Okay.
The most return.
Yeah, that's
If I take
right.
risk.
You think, but if we look back historically on the figures with the iFund, it's and folks, it's everything outside of the U.S. So it's not domestic stock fund like the C or the S fund. Charlie and Sam. I always say Charlie here, Charles, Chuck D, and Uncle Sam. They got your back, right? So that's how you remember the TSP funds for growth. But the iFund has always been around, but it's paled in comparison. Is that the expression? Yeah, it pales in comparison to the C and the S fund. And so they've been doing some things with the iFund. Ann, why don't you tell us about that?
Well,
What's
they
been done?
being the TSP board, there's a governing body over the thrift savings plan that can make changes and regulations, sometimes with the approval of Congress, and some things they have the ability to do on their own. But the index that determines your return on the iFund has been changed. And that is a critical factor if you're going to look at the iFund in the future.
It sure is. Because as you've told me, and I'm going to go back in 4 and 5 years ago, you said the problem with the iFund is they do not include emerging markets. And by excluding emerging markets, they're focused almost exclusively on established markets with companies that have been around for decades that may not have much growth. And when you're thinking about your stock funds in the TSP, the CS and I fund, you're typically wanting growth because you're taking risk. And how are you going to get growth when you're dealing with companies possibly that just don't have much growth potential? How's that?
That was a great explanation. And it really gets to the heart of why the iFund was what I would call unsuccessful, didn't perform as we might have anticipated. If you think about over the last decade, or maybe a little longer, Americans have been encouraged to think globally. And so PSP participants are no different. They're thinking, well, I should have some representation in an international fund. I stands for international, without really digging in and finding out that I'm not getting any emerging markets in that particular index.
Yes, so you would want that, but if they're not willing to expose you to that, well, then you're kind of, rowing up a creek without any paddle type thing. Yeah. So you're left to really flounder around. And that's one of the reasons why I was never very keen on the iPhones.
Well, the TSP the board, to their credit, does audits, and every so often they look and say, how is this index performing compared to our expectations? And they did determine that the index was too narrow, it was too heavily concentrated in just 5 countries and too narrow. And so beginning in 2017, they said, we want to create a broader index. And it was scheduled to actually change in June of 2020. Then it was scheduled to change in 2021. But the Department of Labor came out and said, we think that we should help protect the retirement assets of federal employees and military personnel that can invest in the iFund within the TSP. And the indexes the TSP board was considering included China. And so they were a little intimidated by the fact that, hey, we don't want our employees, this is the Department of Labor speaking, we don't think that they should maybe be investing in countries that don't have our best interests at heart. So that shift to a new, broader index was halted.
When was that?
So that was back in 2021 and 2022.
How about that? Okay, so what did they do, Ann? What did they do to make this fun? Come on, convince me, because oftentimes when I'm dealing with federal families, we will redesign the Lifecycle fund to weight more into the C fund, especially in the S fund, and less or none in the I fund, and we'll create our own Lifecycle fund. And so, because as I think about Warren Buffett, who said, wasn't he the one who said bet on America, right? And so when I look at the returns of the C and the S fund, I'm like, hey, looks a lot better than the I fund. So, Ann, what did they do? Tell
Well,
me.
so originally the index included 21 countries. They added 23 emerging market countries. So now instead of having 21 countries, we have 44. It leaves out China and Hong Kong. So, of course, the United States isn't in it. We have our own separate markets in the C and the S fund, but it's everything, all the traded markets around the world, 43 countries, leaving out China and Hong Kong. That satisfied the Department of Labor. And when we go look at how that particular index has performed since 2008, that's as long as it's been around, it looks significantly better than the Morgan Stanley EFA index that the iFund tracked previously.
How about that? Okay, good. And did they snap their fingers and it was done, or what happened?
Well, if you've been around the federal government for a while, you understand there is no snapping of the fingers and things just happen. It is a process, sometimes a long process, but earlier this year, over a period of a few months, not an instantaneous trade, but over a period of a few months, that transition was made and all the iFund dollars are now in the new index.
Is that right? Well, okay, all right. Because we were talking earlier about the TSP Lifecycle funds, and I want to look and if I look to the farthest Lifecycle fund out there, I might see. I think we said 37%
About
of
35, I think.
about 35% was in the I fund. And when I think about that, oh, here I go. I'm looking at it right now as I record here. Uh, Hardly anything. There's 1% between the G and the F fund. So that's good. But this means you're going to retire in like 40 years or something like that. Yeah. And then we've got the S fund is at 13%. Charlie fund is 51%, and I fund is 35%. Yeah, see, I still will be maybe flip flopping the S and the I fund type thing, or maybe waiting a little bit more to the C fund even. So now I'm not making a recommendation for anybody. I'm just telling you that those are the thoughts that I might have. Yeah.
I think there is the argument now to at least, for those of you who might have been avoiding the iFund altogether all these years, to at least give it a little consideration at this point. Because I think that at least we know past performance is not an indicator of future results, but
That's right.
uh, there's only one direction we can look, and that's in the rearview mirror to see what has happened. I do believe the returns will be better in this new index.
Well, that's exciting. We're going to give it a chance. We're going to watch it, see where it goes and what it does, and hopefully that'll have some positive effect for for all life cycle participants. Because I know since 2013, uh, I can when I meet with somebody and I know what their hire date was, if they were hired in 2013 or afterwards, they're automatically put into the life cycle funds. And that's not a bad thing, Ann, as you know. That's a great thing because those years prior who were automatically put into the G fund and didn't know any better, their TSPs, yeah. And listen, it's water under the bridge. If you're listening right now, don't concern yourself with what was. That water's already flowed. But take a point in time right now, dig your heels in and say, I need to know what are my goals? What's my risk tolerance? How many years do I have towards retirement? And do I want to have any growth? If I do, then maybe I want to consider not having my plan in the G fund entirely or wholly. And maybe you want to simplicity would state figure out when you're going to retire and go and get that life cycle fund that the year matches more or less your time frame for when you expect to retire and use that money for income. So that's what I'm telling you right now. At least that will save you. I'm not telling you to make any changes. I'm just telling you if you were put in the G fund entirely prior to 2013, you might want to examine the Lifecycle funds. Those are target funds in the real world. In private sector, they call them target funds. And in TSP, they just call them Lifecycle funds. But that number at the end of that L just stands for the calendar year when you're going to retire and you expect to use it for income. And they give you 5-year increments. So you're going to hit pretty close to when you expect to retire.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Ann. Are you a skier?
I am no longer a skier. I have skied. I used to enjoy it a lot. I'm one of those people that doesn't like traffic. And so when you live in Colorado and you try to go skiing for the day, not fun.
I know. I live in Southern California. When I just go up to Big Bear, we have to come home the backside of the mountain. And nobody goes. And it's okay. It adds 20 minutes, but it's a breeze. I mean, compared to going back the other way that could take 4 hours, it's insanity, right? Because it takes you 2 hours to get up there in the morning, but coming out, no way. You don't want to do that. So I feel what you're saying. I feel for you too. Yeah. I'm a snowboarder, so there's that. Yeah.
Yes.
I figure if I could still tumble around and get wiped out, I must be in good shape.
Yeah.
So, okay, Ann, I'm going to lay on my health tip, okay, instead of asking you for yours.
Great.
And I tell you this, Ann, I've talked to you before about that institute where we took my son to help him retrain his brain, right? And the cross patterning from walking.
Yes.
They had him doing a gymnastic program. It wasn't advanced by any means, a lot of tumbling and different moves, but we had bought gym mats. And I remember looking at those gym mats when I was in I guess it was my late 30s, and looking at that thinking, can I do a somersault? And you know what was weird? Initially I couldn't, and I had to get my body oiled in the rhythm to remember it again. And I wouldn't recommend doing it on a hard floor. But if you got a carpeted floor, I'm going to tell you something, because I was talking about snowboarding. It really helps as you age to stay tumbling, of all things. I'm not telling you just jump on the floor like that, but work it out. If you got some mats at the gym, see if you can't do a somersault. And I would, believe it or not, I know it might sound crazy, but I would say continue to do that every several weeks. Test your body, make sure you can still roll into a somersault and out again. You stay nimble like that, your body will stay not just balanced, but it'll be used to the flexing and springing about like youth. It will wake your body up, I believe, and remind you of what your body's capable of doing. Don't let your body get in a sedentary lifestyle. That is just the secret sauce to go down fast. I'm telling you, don't let it happen. Popping beers and watching TV for 5 hours is not a good prescription for good health. Okay. Yeah. I'm not knocking beer or watching TV, because God knows the NFL takes a while to watch. But I'm just saying, yeah, you want to stay active, stay nimble. I guess I would consolidate that into staying nimble. I still go into the ocean, and I'm an ocean swimmer. So that kind of helps you too, because sometimes you'll get tossed about as you go out, but especially when you come back in, you got to watch out and get in pretty quick, but you have to be nimble, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go try that. I'm going to see if I can do a somersault.
I thought I saw your eyes really light up, right? Okay. That's a wrap on this episode of TSP's iFund and its redesign. Thank you, TSP board and BlackRock and anybody else who had a hand in that. CD Financial, where health meets wealth. I'm Chuck D. That's Ann V. Click on the links and resources for more information. We've got it for you, and we're here for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and by all means, share it. We love it, and we love working with you and helping you. Okay, and until I see you next time.
CD Financial, where health meets wealth.